So you're not getting the ice time that you feel like you deserve. And it's really frustrating, right? You want to push yourself on the ice, you want to get to the next level, and you're not getting the opportunities. What do you do? Well, it's going to come down to realizing that, yes, politics are real. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, no, politics are fake. Like, you just have to be good and you'll never deal with any challenges. Of course, that's not true. But what I want you to get through what I'm saying is that it is not going to change anything if you continue to focus on it and not really change the way you act. Because if all you do is complain about a situation, but nothing actually changes in terms of focusing on the controllables, well then you're going to consistently end up blaming that person all the way through until you don't get to where you want to go. So if you want to be the person who does get to where you want to go, and you want to also maximize your chances of just being the best you can be, well, then there has to be a different approach you take, right? Because we've all seen it. We've seen the people who just constantly yell at everybody else and say, it's that person's fault, it's that person's fault. And eventually you'll see them walk down a path, and then they're that old person in the, back of a bar or whatever, just being like, oh man, I could have been great if it weren't for this or this or this. Right? And so you don't want to be in that situation where you're giving your power away to something else. You're blaming other things and you don't have control over the outcomes you get. So the more time you spend in that place of constantly blaming everyone else, right, it's going to hold you back. And so let's get into it. Let's really dig into what it's going to take for you to get beyond this. So the first thing to realize is that fundamentally, you need to build trust with your coach if you want to play more, right? If your coach doesn't trust you, then he's not going to put you on the ice in key situations because he doesn't trust you're going to provide an outcome. So the way that you build trust is by producing and having positive outcomes, right? You make positive plays and you build trust through doing that consistently. So ultimately, consistency is the key. You want to be a consistent player. If you're not consistent, you're going to consistently sit on the bench, right? And so consistency and trust are built through what you're going to see here right now is this diagram of really understanding what it takes to build trust between a player and a coach, right? And so ultimately, fundamentally, what happens is you have an opportunity. You either make a successful play or you make a failed or a negative play, right? Positive or negative. If it's positive, you increase the trust with the coach, which leads to you getting more opportunities. And then you either succeed or you cycle over to the other side, which is you fail or have a negative outcome and then lowered output or lowered trust and then less opportunity, which then brings you back to, again, next opportunity is a positive or negative. This is what creates a spiral, right? A spiral will either go up or down generally. And so you want to pay attention to this. Now, the most common scenario that people run into is that they don't just spiral one way, but instead they play success and failure ping pong, right? So they succeed and make a positive play, then they make a negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. So now your coach doesn't even know what to expect on any given shift or any given situation, which again, ultimately is probably just as bad as making bad plays all the time. And so you want to realize how important it is to build that trust, which then provides the value for your coach to then justify putting you on the ice more often, right? Now, if you come to me and say, it's just politics, well, yeah, of course there's stuff that gets in the way. But again, if you can be that person that your coach trusts, there's always a few players on a team that no matter how bad the coach wants to, screw them over or whatever it is, they just provide so much value that they have to get played. You want to be that person on every single team that you're on. Now, there's one exception to this concept of the coach and trust scenario, is that not every player has to obey these rules if you are an outlier offensively. So if you look at a McDavid or an Ovechkin and players like that, it's different for those guys, right? Because the best players in the world, if they're producing so much offense that the coach can put them out there and take a gamble that they may not play good defensively, but their offensive upside is so high that they got to put them out because they're world class at it. So of course you can take that strategy. If you're already a player putting up like 2, 3, 4 points a game at a younger age, well, you can try that strategy. It's tough because when you do get to the NHL, odds are you're probably not going to be that person because you have to be like one out of the millions of players who play, it's just not a great strategy to take. So instead, if you go with the consistency, that's going to make a big difference, because being consistent means that you build that trust through actually providing a stable, trustable output, instead of being somebody who varies but has really high highs and really low lows, but the highs just outweigh the lows, right? That's like a McDavid or an Ovechkin, especially Ovechkin. McDavid's starting to piece together his game and become a more complete player. So ultimately, what is the real issue and why can't you play consistently right now, right? Because obviously you want to be great all the time, but why is it not happening? Well, the main issue and the reason you're not having dominant games is because something mentally is blocking you. Because if you've done it before, you've dominated, you've played well before, it's not that you can't do it consistently. Just because you have an off game, or just because you have a good game, doesn't mean that you're not going to play well in the next one, right? Like, just because you play well one game doesn't mean like now you just like bounce, you sink down and you have to play bad and then good and then bad. But instead what happens is that most players get into this really weird psychology, which is that like they play well for a bit and then they start to fall off and things start to not click as well. And then they kind of identify they're in a slump, and then they get stuck in that slump, and then they get out of it and they're like, I'm on a hot streak, then I'm in a slump. But the difference between the players who get out of it quickly and don't is that they're able to really quickly shift their self-image. And we talked about this in previous videos, so you can go back and watch some of the previous ones about self-image. But once you get that and you really click into, it's about how I see myself, well, that's going to make the difference, right? So it's a mental block that you have. And so this is the concept that I try to talk to with all of my clients right away when we start working together, is that the problem is you have a bottleneck. And so a bottleneck is something that is limiting your performance. I like to think of skill as like the flow of water through a river. And so if you squeeze the flow, right, if you like limit the width of the river, the water can't flow through the area as much because it's like a smaller place to flow through, right? It's like pouring water out of a bottle. It bottlenecks at the end. And so what you can see in this diagram is how that looks, and the little circles are really the skills that get to flow through. And so if you have mental blocks, it will actually be like a physical like boulder in the middle of a river that just slows all of the flow down so way less water can get through. That's the challenge that most players have, and you probably have, is that you have way more ability than you realize or are willing to accept, or maybe you know it, but you can't figure out, why can't I just play like this all the time? Well, you can't play like this all the time because something mentally is blocking you from playing consistently. You're struggling with whether it's focus, whether it's IQ, whether it's self-belief, whether it's some kind of like decision-making process. There's something getting in the way that's stopping you. And so you have to acknowledge the fact that the mental game is the bottleneck. If you have the skill, but you're just not playing consistently. Consistency has to be rewired, and it takes work and it takes effort. But the key action steps you want to take here is come out of this and start doing the free masterclass that we have. It's an hour-long program, approximately, and it's going to teach you everything you need to know to actually transform your mental game completely for free. I made this, and I used to teach this for over $1,500 for 3 months of training, and I realized that that was like helpful, but why not make this available to more players? And so if you're somebody who's serious and you realize, okay, I just can't play consistently, I have the skills, I seem to show it sometimes, but something's getting in the way, then that is exactly what the free mental masterclass is for. So try that out. Start on the first lesson and get right into the fundamentals of what is stopping you. And once you can break through those and understand those core pieces, then the rest of the training is going to take you through a step-by-step guide to master your mindset, your focus, your confidence, your IQ, and understanding how to design training systems overall. It's every single thing you need to actually build it all out. And so go try it, go use it, and I promise you it will be the most valuable hour of hockey training that you've done. And if it isn't, then send me a message, let me know what stopped it, and I will go make it better. Okay? So get started with that, break through this bottleneck, and then watch how quickly you suddenly start to find this new consistency. And when consistency starts, you get more ice time, you build trust, and this whole player-coach trust starts to build. So I hope this helps. Make sure to subscribe for more like this, whether it's on YouTube or the podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all the socials, and I'll be happy to help you out. Hope you have a great week. Hope you crush it, and I'll talk to you guys soon.